How are you? You all right? You good? Good, good. So, beloved in the Lord and esteemed guests and advocates for justice and immigration rights and community transformation, good evening. In behalf of the Board of Trustees, welcome to our parish, the Fort Washington Collegiate Church and your church. We are so honored that you are here as we come together this evening to discuss the vital issues of immigration rights and equity for our beloved immigrants in the United States and territories or colonies of the United States. Your presence underscores the importance of this conversation tonight. And I look forward to listening, moments for reflection plus Q&A. Again, thank you for being here tonight. Let us pray. God of love and compassion, may we always recognize your spirit in the refugee family seeking safety from violence, in the migrant worker bringing food to our tables, and the asylum seeker seeking justice for their families, in the unaccompanied child traveling in dangerous worlds. Amen. Before receiving State Senator Jackson, I would like to take a few moments. You know, for pastors, this is like, you give me a mic, and but I just want to share some thoughts pertaining to the matters of immigration. And according to our sacred text, the Holy Bible, in the Hebrew Scriptures in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, teaches us the following. When an alien resides with you in your land, you should not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the native born among you. You shall love the alien as yourself. For you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord, your God. Over the past few days, members of our community of faith and congregational friends have shared with us the immediate impact of recent executive orders focused on immigration. We have heard about families frightened of being torn apart from congregations, fearful of their churches that can no longer offer safety or support to their immigrant neighbors. Many of us here at Fort Washington Collegiate Church come from immigrant families. Our congregation has a long tradition of hospitality, of helping displaced refugees, assisting refugee communities, advocating groups, and welcoming new immigrants. Our church, for many years, has called for compassionate and just and wise immigration reform. Today, recent immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers and displaced people are members of our congregation and our collegiate churches here in Manhattan. The presence of newcomers heightens our awareness of issues of relevance to the church and our immigrant communities. So without any hesitation, we are glad to join tonight's faithful deliberation to support the lives of our immigrant sisters and brothers. Our congregation is aware that leaving one's home country is not made lightly. Many have arrived fleeing persecution because of how they worship, their political views, or their race and nationality, and from whom they love in life. And political instability and environmental disaster and lack of opportunities have also compelled many to seek a more dignified life here in the United States. The Holy Scriptures are clear. We're called to see the image of God in our immigrant neighbors. following God's call in Leviticus 19 that is echoed throughout sacred texts. I end my comments on behalf of our congregation with the following. We are a sanctuary church. God calls us to welcome the stranger and love the sojourner as we love ourselves. I pray for God's grace to increase our understanding towards immigrants today and tomorrow. And before I forget, I have to do this. You are cordially welcome to join us on Sunday at 11 a.m. At this time, let us welcome our state Senator Robert Jackson, who is the chairperson of the Civil Service and Pensions Committee. He also serves on the following committee: Education, Health, Higher Education, Labor, New York City Education, and a member of the Select Minority Task Force on Minority Women-Owned Business Enterprises. That's a lot, Senator. Okay. Let us welcome Senator Jackson.
Good evening, everyone. How we doing? So on behalf of all of the people that we represent, 339,000 constituents in the District 31, I welcome you and thank you for being here, because we're all here to look after people that are here trying to fix their lives as far as jobs and opportunities and watch their families. And this is extremely important, not only to them, but to us also as neighbors throughout the entire city and districts. So we gathered today in solidarity, not just for our neighbors, as I said, but just as allies, but as advocates of justice, dignity, and sanctuary. We meet here at Fort Washington Cathedral Church, a space that I know very well. Been living up the block for about 49 years, and where community stands as a shield against injustice. And I extend my deepest gratitude to our co-hosts for opening the doors, not only the doors, but their hearts and their unwavering commitment to justice. And our community is at a crossroads here. 181st Street, when you walk down 181st Street toward Broadway, you see all of the people that are trying to take buses going downtown, uptown, crosstown, in the Bronx. 1/3 of our district is in the Northwest Bronx. Many places of University Heights, Cambridge Heights, a little bit of Riverdale, all over the place is part of the 31st Senatorial District. So history teaches us that silence is an accomplice to injustice. And we will not be silent. We will not be divided. We will fight for one another and always. And that's what we need to do. We are all brothers and sisters of the human race, and we should look after one another. You agree with that or disagree? And that's why when I walk in the community, I say hello to everyone, because these are community residents, brothers and sisters that live here just like I do, and we're not strangers to one another. We see each other on a continuous basis, and we should speak from a peaceful point of view by saying, hello, how are you today? And so that's important. So to our immigrant neighbors, you are not alone. Team Jackson is myself with all the other people that's working for me and working for you. They stand ready today and every day, and that's why I introduced Senate Bill S4121, Senate Bill S4121, the Keep Our Civilians Safe Act, because no one should fear arrest at their child's school, their doctor's office, or their house of worship. Justice does not ask for papers. And in New York, we will not be an accomplice in oppression. And so solidarity is our strength, sanctuary is our promise, and justice is a non-negotiable item. And it's now my honor to introduce my chief of staff, but a member and leader in this church, Joanna Garcia, the daughter of Cuban immigrants and dedicated member of our church and dedicated member of our community, a fierce advocate who embodies the spirit of tonight's mission. Joanna, the floor is yours. And you're the, yeah, you're the.
Yeah, I can't hop down like the senator did all the time. He embarrasses us in the office all the time. Welcome, everyone. I know many of you, and for those that I do know and those that I don't know, this is an opportunity for us to mark today as the beginning of a long, challenging road together that will be made much more shorter and will be much more manageable if we continue to be the light that we need to be on this path. Again, my name is Joanna Garcia. I am an elder of this church. Also, AKA board member is pretty much the same thing. So I'm wearing two hats. I'm wearing the hat of elder, and I'm also wearing the hat of chief of staff. And many times I am asked, how do you work in politics, government, and reconcile that with the church? Two answers. One, we've seen many in this nation hijack what it means to be spiritual and what it means to be a humanitarian to actually oppress and attack the vulnerable. So it's time for us to shift that and be really loud about our narrative about what it means to be humanitarian and spiritual and care for humankind. And also, my favorite and more glib response is, Jesus Christ was the best social justice warrior that ever walked the planet. So he's an idol for me, spiritually. But also, I want to recognize really quick, not just like really appreciate Pastor David and the fact that we stand in a house of worship that really represents what it means to embrace everyone and to be inclusive. And it is always with great pride that I walk through these doors on Sundays and know that this stage is flanked by two very important flags, Black Lives Matter and the LGBTQI, I am not gonna drop any letters, flag. And as well that we share this sacred space in this community with our partners, not only the Y, but also the Fort Tryon Jewish Center, and we're here accompanied by Rabbi Guy, who I saw in the front. And I also think I saw Pastor Gowan from Holy Trinity Inwood, who's also here. I did see, yes, there you are. So I just want to make sure that I welcome everyone. So let me also share some very pressing details. The restrooms. It's very important, right? So just quickly, the restrooms, if you leave through these doors, you go straight down this narrow hallway and you'll see a sign that says restroom, and you turn this way. I'm going this way because I'm really bad with directions, so don't ever get in the car if I'm driving. So it's this way, right? And then the bathroom is single use. It's on the right-hand side. If that's occupied and you don't want to wait that long, there's also, you can take the stairs one flight or the elevator one flight to the first floor and cellar level, because this is the first floor, and you'll see the bathrooms there. The other housekeeping, again, language access. Si necesita traducción, por favor, recuérdese que aquí adelante tenemos equipo para usted poder escuchar el programa en vivo, real traducción. And with that, I want to thank Jacinta de la Cruz. Jacinta, where are you? Jacinta's right there, and she is an immigration lawyer and for CUNY, right? And I think you're also a law professor for immigration. And she has graciously volunteered to be our translator today. So I just want to give her a round of applause for that. So quickly, the format of the program today is that we're going to have these wonderful panelists, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. Let me talk slower because I just realized Jacinta's translating. An opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we're going to have a little bit of Q&A, but we will definitely have an opportunity, provide you all with an opportunity to ask questions. There have been many Know Your Rights events in this community, in person and online, and we welcome all those that are impacted. And what we wanted to do tonight is take it a little further. We know that this community of Uptown, Harlem, Washington Heights, Inwood, beyond, is full of people. We are made strong because we are a village that cares about our neighbors. And so we wanted to make sure to have an event that went further than knowing your rights. We wanted to make sure that we were empowered to help our neighbor and understand what does that look like. In addition, we wanted to make sure that we are prepared to protect our sanctuary spaces. And this originated with a conversation of the board of directors together with our pastor David saying, this is a church. This is a space of sanctuary. What does it look like to protect our neighbors? And if you notice, when you come in, you see clear signs that says, ICE is not welcomed here. Can we say that together? ICE is not welcomed here. Thank you. I'll ask you to introduce yourselves, and then I'll go around. I'm going to ask, and we can go in order. First of all, thank you and welcome, and thank you for making the commitment to be here today. I'm going to ask you to go one by one and introduce yourself to briefly, a little bit about your organization as I walk behind you and try not to distract you to sit over there. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brennan Verink, the Associate Director for Migrant Outreach at the Interfaith Center of New York. The Interfaith Center of New York was founded in 1997 out of a belief and an understanding that our faith communities in New York City play an integral role in upholding civil society. That means that we do work that responds alongside houses of worship to work on the biggest issues that are facing New York City. Specifically for me, that means running a coalition of 90 houses of worship and faith-based and community-based organizations who are finding ways to support, to advocate with, and alongside the newest New Yorkers. I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alina Moquete. I am a paralegal with the Northern Manhattan Coalition for Immigrant Rights. It's a nonprofit, community-based organization
Thank you to all of you, and we're going to get started right away. The first set of questions is going to go to Jessica Mates from the Attorney General's office. And Jesse, just so you know, we have those slides queued, so you just say like next slide whenever you want, so people will be able to see, like read along whenever you want. You just say next and it'll click, okay? But Jesse, can you start off by helping us set the stage a bit and telling us how we got here? What are some of the executive orders from the White House as it relates to immigration?
So, you know, how we got here is an interesting question. I think in the last Trump administration, we were, obviously the Attorney General was involved in a lot of lawsuits. I think there were about 100 lawsuits at that time, and many of them were successful, about 80%. This time is going to be a little bit different. But the Democratic attorneys general throughout the country, and there's more than 20 of them, have been meeting for about 8 months now, preparing for just in case Trump won. And so we have looked at all of the different areas that might be impacted and have worked on figuring out sort of which attorney general is going to take on which and how everyone can support each other. So we were prepared, but things came fast and furious. And since day one, the Trump administration has done a lot of executive orders. They've tried to freeze essential funding. They have trampled on people's rights, tried to rewrite the Constitution, created a lot of confusion. And so we're trying to cut through some of that chaos and to really uphold the law. One of the first executive orders that Trump issued, or his administration issued, was trying to end birthright citizenship. And many people may have heard about this. Birthright citizenship has guaranteed that if you're born in this country, regardless of your parents' status, that you're a U.S. citizen. The 14th Amendment in the Constitution is clear that any child born in this country is a citizen. So the Trump administration, one of his first executive orders, tried to get rid of birthright citizenship. The New York Attorney General, James, along with 13 other attorneys general, went to court and challenged this executive order, and so far have been successful. And I always say so far because all of the rulings, some of the rulings are temporary and they're called preliminary injunctions. Some of them get challenged. A lot of these things are going to stay in the courts for a while. But for now, it has been the idea of ending birthright citizenship is frozen. It's not happening right now. So we were successful in that regard, and we're very happy about that. There are some other things that happen that that really impact everybody. They impact immigrants. They impact everyone in our communities. One of the things that Trump tried to do was to freeze essential funding, and really just cut off, just freeze all of the funding. And this is funding for Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, child care, disaster relief. So again, we went to court. It hurts everyone across the board, right? This funding was for all kinds of services, programs, things that people rely on. So again, we went to court. We took action to restore this funding, and right now a judge has ordered the Trump administration to fully comply with the first order that said that you cannot freeze the funding. The funding has to continue to flow. So again, right now we're okay. The funding is continuing, although there are still some glitches from the first freeze. But we're expecting that that to be successful on that front as well. So these things keep coming fast and furious, and we will continue, as our Attorney General says, we'll continue to sue and to go to court as often as we need to, as these executive orders and actions come down.
Thank you, Jesse. Yes. We're very, very grateful to the great work that Attorney General Tish James is doing on behalf of New York, and thank you to you too. And you shared some of the executive orders, EOs, that we've been combating. And what's really scary is that we're not even 90 days into this administration, and the information, I want to call them for what they are. The attacks are coming fast and furious. And it's a great deal for any American, any New Yorker, any resident, any human being to process and figure out like, what's going on. You know, did we win that fight? Where do we go? So my question is, what is the best way to keep current on these executive orders and lawsuits?
Right. So I encourage people to go to our website where we have a lot of great information. I think that's what some of the slides were, but I have some handouts and can talk more about them. But basically, I encourage people to go to our website. It's pretty simple. It's ag.ny.gov. On our website, you can click on press releases. I always encourage people to click on press releases because every time we go to court, every time there's a decision, we immediately issue a press release so that people know about it, right? It doesn't help anyone if no one knows what's going on. So I encourage you to go on the website, click on press releases, and you can see each day, you know, we filed a court action, or a judge made a decision, or the Attorney General was making a statement about a decision. So you can see every day sort of what's happening in court, and that is really the best way to keep up. I wanted to just say one other thing. In addition to the lawsuits, one of the roles of our office is to what we call issue guidance, and that is to instruct agencies and people of New York State of what their rights are and what the laws are. And it's hard right now. My colleagues are going to do a much better job at sort of being very clear about, you know, helping people to understand and to fight back when needed. I just want to say that some of the guidance is important. For example, yesterday we issued guidance for private and nonprofit organizations, and we did that along with the governor's office. And it was about immigration enforcement because we're used to living in what, you know, a sanctuary city, right? So we're used to these sacred places, houses of worship, schools, food pantries, shelters. You know, there's a lot of places, and those were kind of sacred, right, up until now. Unfortunately, the Department of Homeland Security Department has basically told the ICE enforcers that it's kind of up to them to figure out if they should go into a space or not. And you know, we don't agree with that. We don't give legal advice, but our guidance states, and I just want to get the wording right because it's important, that as a general matter, private property remains protected under the Fourth Amendment that limits immigration agents' conduct and protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Individuals also have rights. They have the right to remain silent under the Fifth Amendment, and additionally, citizens, individuals, residents, and many of your organization clients or patients might have some more rights under some local or even state and federal rules. Laws like HIPAA, which protects health information, or attorney-client privilege, which protects information that you can talk to your attorney about. So we just wanted to be clear that these are rights that exist. It doesn't mean things aren't going to be challenged, but again, we encourage you, and that's why I mentioned our website. On our website, you can look at this guidance for nonprofits, and then we also provide guidance for law enforcement on what they're supposed to do and not supposed to do. Along with the state education department, we give guidance to schools about what they are supposed to do in terms of not letting ICE in. And then we also have healthcare information for transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people, and LGBTQIA rights as well on our website. So I encourage you to continue to check in our website because we'll continue to issue guidance and we'll continue to report on all the lawsuits as they happen.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm now going to turn over to Brennan from the Interfaith Center of New York. Brennan, in addition to the EOs, and we heard some of them right now, one of the biggest changes the federal government has made is, and we heard that a bit from Jesse, is to rescind the sensitive locations protections. What does the change to ICE policy mean for New Yorkers, and what protections do New Yorkers still have thanks to New York City and state sanctuary laws?
handbook. And what the sensitive locations memo said is it barred ICE from doing enforcement in these specific crucial places, schools, in hospitals, in houses of worship. And it's really a bad thing that they took away this protection. It's bad for the newest New Yorkers, but it's also bad for all New Yorkers, and that's true everywhere in the country. It's bad because if people are sick and they don't feel comfortable going to the hospital, it's bad for all of our public health. If our students don't feel safe going to school because they think ICE might come into their classroom, it's bad for that student, and it's bad for every student in that class. And the same is true in houses of worship, where folks are A, receiving essential social services that they may no longer feel comfortable going to, and B, are attending worship services, thinking about who they are, taking a moment of respite and breath in the world. So I front load everything that's kind of frustrating and bad about this, but I want to really emphasize, just because the sensitive locations memo has been rescinded, that doesn't mean that houses of worship no longer have rights. Houses of worship still have rights. Crucially, houses of worship are still able to operate as with private spaces within them, and they're able to, when ICE shows up at their front door, say, okay, well, can we look at a warrant? And not just a warrant, ICE will show up with an administrative warrant, which maybe will be signed by an ICE officer, but those are not valid warrants. What's a valid warrant is a judicial warrant, which will be signed by a judge and dated, and it's only in those cases that a house of worship, if they set up some other protections, needs to abide by the judicial warrant or by a subpoena. And similar things are true for non-houses of worship. So because New York City and New York State have sanctuary laws, our schools and our hospitals are putting in similar protections in order to make sure that students are not as vulnerable as the rescinding of the sensitive locations memo makes them. But it's still crucial that at a federal level and at a state level, we work to put these protections for schools, put protections for houses of worship, and put protections for other essential places of life into law, because there aren't spaces where ICE ought to be operating.
Thank you. Thank you. That's extremely, extremely helpful. What are some priority needs, sanctuary spaces in your network? What are some of the priority needs of sanctuary spaces in your network that you're seeing? And what support can your organization offer to those who want to actively serve this population?
I'm going to do a little show and tell for
Yes.
this section, but I'm just going to start with a similar disclaimer, which is what the Interfaith Center, what I cannot offer, which I can't offer specific legal guidance. You should have these conversations with an attorney. And even if I could offer this specific guidance, I'm not an attorney, so you wouldn't want it. And just so you know. But here's some examples. Houses of worship are coming to me and they're saying, we want to know our rights. Where do we start? Where do we find resources for directly impacted individuals, and where do we find our rights as a house of worship? The place I would recommend you start is on the Interfaith Center website. If you follow this QR code, this is at the front desk, and I can make sure that if you need one of these, you can get one of these later. We have our general sanctuary guidelines. It's a toolkit, it's a rather extensive toolkit that lays out what rights houses of worship have, the sorts of programs you maybe could think about starting or collaborating with. So it's an in-depth jumping off place. But I'm also hearing lots of questions, and hopefully we saw some of these signs out front. What sort of signs can you put up? There's sign packets that operate under different levels of sort of legal theory, and therefore will probably be different levels of effective, but let's say things like ICE is not welcome here. We don't, you probably, everyone saw us in front of you, we're not going to work. ICE is going to have to stop and show a judicial warrant. You can demarcate spaces with private signs elsewhere. Two other concerns in here. One is we're seeing a lot less attendance. People are scared to go to their houses of worship. People are putting into place systems where they move queues from outdoors to indoor spaces so that people feel more safe. People are thinking through and navigating systems for how some of their services can be turned into an online format. And we're trying to get creative. And the last thing I'll say, a really real question I get is, how am I going to remember all of this when ICE shows up at my front door and I'm in an incredibly stressful situation? And so think through your space and where in your space you can put physical reminders who at your front desk when you hand important signs like a one-pager that shows exactly what a judicial valid warrant looks like versus these phony administrative warrants that ICE often shows up with.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very, very helpful. And I know that you've partnered with organizations that have been reaching out to houses of worships to give them these toolkits. So we're very grateful for that.
I'll note really quickly that even though I'm not an attorney, I didn't put together the toolkit. An attorney did put together the toolkit.
That's awesome. Very helpful. Very helpful. Um, and so, as we're talking about understanding the executive orders, understanding what it is to protect these sanctuary spaces, there does come the question of how do we organize to protect our communities. So I'm going to now turn to Isa from Malika. Isa, our office has received a lot of outreach from concerned neighbors who are eager to help. What strategies can you offer as it pertains to organizing and rallying the community behind this critical issue?
Yes, thank you. I think after hearing a lot of what maybe know your rights trainings or other legal guidance, especially if you were someone who's thinking to yourself, I'm just a community member, I'm just a church member, I'm just a temple or mosque member, what can I do? I really sympathize with that and empathize with that because there is so much that we can do and it starts very simple. But looking at this from a really big picture point of view can feel overwhelming. But change is specific, it is concrete, and it is detailed. And so we can really work with our neighbors to first identify a goal. Who are we targeting, or what is an issue, right? What is an issue that I myself, as a person, maybe I'm a churchgoer, or maybe I work at a place of employment that I can maybe organize with my coworkers, I can organize with my neighbors, who are like-minded individuals, right? First reaching out to those people and finding a group really that is like-minded and like-valued. And then moving on from there, identifying a target. Who do I actually have the power to talk to and influence and change? And so, depending on your positionality, that can be very different. So, if you are just an employee at a deli, you can maybe target your employer, right? Or whoever owns the deli, for example, to maybe make policies that will then help your undocumented neighbors, customers, for example, right? Or maybe if you are working with an organization that has considerable power, then targeting maybe your electeds, targeting, reaching a little bit bigger, right? So please don't feel overwhelmed. First, let's reach out to the people that are around us, and then identify a target, and then now we can create a plan, right? And so with organizing, there are a few really basic tactics that we can use, right? And so they really vary in how they actually affect power structures. So how they actually alter the system that has allowed us and brought us to the point where we are now facing these executive orders, right? And so we can start off with direct service. And so direct service can be meeting people's needs exactly where they're at. And so this doesn't exactly change the power structure, right? It doesn't change those orders, it doesn't change much of that, but it will meet your community members, the people that you care about, exactly where they're at. So some examples of that could be organizing bail or jail support for people who have been detained by ICE, right? Or helping to organize groups that can then pay people's bonds, for example. Organizing legal support. If you are a lawyer or if you're in contact with lawyers, you can organize legal support and kind of create still held, kind of using that public awareness to help them then be released. Lastly, direct action. And this is what's going to actually completely disrupt and alter the power structure. And so this is what I think people most know of organizing and what they see, and that looks like protesting, maybe sit-ins. But maybe we could do things like a little bit more strategically, right, at our workplace. For example, strikes at a place of employment that either directly works with ICE or says that it will help them identify and sort workers. Maybe we're doing sit-ins, organizing community sit-ins at key intersections or key areas of our neighborhood where we know ICE is kind of really targeting right now. Also, really being involved in local ICE patrols, ICE watches. These are all really active methods to kind of help our neighbors understand where ICE is moving and where is safe for them to be in their own neighborhoods, unfortunately. And then lastly, maybe even blocking streets, subway stations where ICE or other law enforcement that's cooperating with ICE is congregating. These are just some brainstorm ideas, but really I want to stress finding your people, finding your community, understanding your own rights, and understanding your own positionality, because different people have different strengths, and also a certain tactic might not be relevant to you. So yeah.
Thank you. That was very comprehensive. And yes, applause, because that was very good. And Isa, I'm going to ask you to send us that information. And then anyone who scanned the QR code to be part of the Senators E-Updates, which goes out every like 8 to 10 days, we would love to include it so that everyone gets that information. I love how you escalated, which is how you organize, right? You like start small, simple, then you go and you brought in the scope. And I think what's really key here is that we're centering that conversation on allies. Because, for example, especially with vulnerable populations like the undocumented, we're not going to ask them to actually participate in the protest because that will really expose them. So really it is leveraging the privilege that documented, that people that are citizens have to protect the vulnerable population. So I really appreciate that. Really, really quick, what can a bystander do if ICE shows up? Like, ICE comes up, I'm a bystander, what do I do?
Once again, this is really going to depend on your own situation, your status as a documented or undocumented community member. But really quickly, just going over basics of bystander intervention, we teach what we like to call the 5 Ds. So there's delegate, right? What we can do is maybe if we are witnessing a situation in which someone is being detained by ICE or which ICE is unfairly or just in general questioning our community members, um, being able to get help from someone who has the authority to maybe de-escalate. So understanding your positionality, it goes back to that, right? If I am an employee, maybe alerting my employer, who has like the power to actually really set standards or to actually speak what are they doing? You're allowed to ask those questions. You are allowed to, as long as you don't impede or obstruct the investigation or the arrest, you are allowed to question them. You are allowed to make your presence there seen and known as well. You might try.
Yes, she
Yeah, you
said
are
document.
allowed to film them, which I will just now get into actually document. But one thing that you could still do is direct, especially, for example, if you maybe you work at a library, you're a librarian, and ICE comes in, and technically you are not allowed to tell them, oh, you can't come in here. You can make an announcement on the intercom, or using the library speaker system, maybe saying something like, oh, ICE, like, if the ICE officer can please make his way to the front. And that alerts people around you, alerts other people who might be in the building that need to kind of escape for their safety, or leave the premises. So there are certain things that you can definitely do to delay, to stall. Again, if you're maybe someone who is owning a business that ICE is coming into, you can speak with them, maybe like use a little bit of delaying tactics to prolong that conversation, right? Um, and then also even directly asking the person who's being detained their name, any information that sounds very general, but that will help then maybe alert like family members, community members, because people are often taken and they don't know what happened to them. And lastly, document. So you are allowed to take photo and video evidence, but please remember that this is for the detainee and their family, first and foremost. So before you run to like post this online, and also if you are maybe seeing ICE in an area and they're not actually detaining or arresting someone, maybe they are just like circling, before you run to put it online, it can really stoke a lot of misinformation and also fear in already vulnerable communities. So just making sure that you're aware of that, and that you're spreading it, either like verifying your information, and then also if you are videoing or taking photo for a family or for a person, providing them with that evidence so that they can decide what to do with it. But a few more tips really quickly. Try to remember, if you're taking video and photo, it's really helpful if you take horizontal photo and video. It captures more details. Please make sure to try and capture the street signs, the setting, time, date, location, as well as like what were the officers presenting themselves as, because they're supposed to identify themselves, and there are definitely a lot of other tactics that they use, but to make sure that we understand kind of like what they're using, how to better protect ourselves in the future, making sure that we're writing down any license plates or cars marked, and I can send more of this information because I'm throwing a lot at you.
No, it's great information. Thank you. So we're now going to turn to neighborhood defenders of Harlem. Scott, your organization particularly sees cases of undocumented neighbors who have had some engagement with the law. As we know, those folks may be at a higher risk of surveillance and deportation. Can you provide general guidance on what, if anything, that specific population can be doing now to decrease their risk? What are their rights?
Thank you for that question. As a public defender office, we do primarily represent people who've had contact with the criminal legal system or the family policing systems. And in particular, contact with the criminal system increases someone's exposure to ICE. And this sort of gets at understanding how to use your rights. It's helpful to understand how ICE operates. They usually talk about the who, the how, and the why. Who does ICE target? How do they locate people, or how do people get onto ICE's radar? And then where do they locate or detain people? The who, so there's 11 million people in the US who are undocumented. ICE in a given year, it deports fewer than 1% of the people in the US who are undocumented. They fortunately don't have the resources to go after everyone. And for that reason, each presidential administration sets its own priorities for ICE for who they're going to target. In name, like publicly, the Trump administration says we're just going to target everyone. But practically speaking, they do more often tend to target people who have a criminal record, and particularly a more recent criminal arrest, as well as people who already have a removal order. Because someone who already has a removal order, they have much fewer rights before they can be removed, as opposed to somebody who doesn't have a removal order will generally have the opportunity to go before a judge, potentially apply for asylum or some other form of relief before they can be removed, which is, there's a $3.6 million case backlog in the immigration courts, so that's a big obstacle for ICE to be able to deport more people. And so ICE enforcement tends to be targeted for people who've recently had contact with the criminal legal system, because that's how they know, that's one of the main ways that they know where people are. So that gets to the second question, the how. How do they locate people? Well, when somebody's arrested, their fingerprints are taken. Those fingerprints are sent to the FBI for a rap sheet check. And the FBI automatically shares those prints with ICE, and then ICE starts tracking that person's criminal case. In New York, we have protections. There's a law called the Protect Our Courts Act that that makes it illegal for ICE to conduct a warrantless arrest at a courthouse. So generally speaking, ICE should not be conducting arrests at courthouses. And there was recent testimony from an official of the Office of Court Administration of New York that ICE had communicated that, at least for the time being, they are not going to violate POCA, and we haven't seen any ICE arrests, no reported ICE arrests at courthouses yet. Since in New York City and New York State, ICE is not able to arrest people at the courthouse, one of the other primary ways that they locate people is through home raids. And again, if somebody has recently had contact with the criminal system, then ICE will have that person's address through the criminal court system. So they can attempt a home raid shortly after that. And so I'll talk about the rights that somebody has if ICE comes to their home. And the other way that somebody tends to come on ICE's radar is if they travel internationally. And so they, like a green card holder, say, who travels and comes back, but let's say they have a conviction that they don't know makes them deportable. The customs officer, when they come back in, they have databases they can look at. They can see the person's record and can choose at that time to put that person in removal proceedings. So it's very important for people to talk with an immigration attorney if they have a contact with the criminal legal system that may make it unsafe for them to travel and come back. And also, if you apply for something like naturalization, if you apply for a benefit with immigration, that is inviting scrutiny into your immigration and your criminal record. And so again, you really want to speak to an immigration attorney to make sure it's safe to do so. Particularly if you have prior criminal contact, even something that's 30 years ago, there's no statute of limitations for when an old criminal case can stop affecting your immigration case. So you always want to talk to an immigration attorney before taking those actions. That's a little bit about ICE enforcement, and I'll do a quick know your rights about what to do if you see ICE at your home, if ICE comes to your home, or if you encounter ICE in public. When ICE attempts a home raid, they almost never have a warrant, because that actually has to be issued by a federal judge, not just an immigration judge, but an actual federal district court or magistrate judge, and it's very difficult for them to be able to do that. So in almost the vast majority of cases, ICE does not have a warrant, and when they come to somebody's home and they knock on the door, since they don't have a warrant, they don't have a right to forcibly enter that person's home. And so what they do is they try to trick the person into opening the door, and they would say consenting to entry. And the way they do that is generally they engage in ruses. They misrepresent themselves. They pretend to be police. They'll pretend they're looking for someone else. They'll even show a picture of someone else. They'll say, oh, we think somebody is trying to steal your identity. They'll come up with all kinds of stories. There's even been reports that they would say, oh, we want to talk to you about the Bible. And they use these ruses to try to get somebody to open the door. So the first and most important thing is if somebody's banging on your door and you don't know who they are, you have the right not to open the door. If they have a warrant, generally we call it the break down the door test. If they break down the door, then they probably do actually have a warrant. But if they don't break down the door and they're knocking and trying to get you to open the door, it's a good sign that they probably don't have a warrant. And sometimes they have documents that they will claim to be a warrant, which is just if we call it an administrative warrant, it's just something from the Department of Homeland Security itself, basically being like, I give myself the right to arrest you, but it has no power because it doesn't come from an actual judge. So only a warrant that comes from an actual, again, district court or magistrate judge actually enables them to enter somebody's home, and they almost never have that. So my advice is typically just if somebody's banging on the door, you don't know who they are or they're claiming to be police, don't engage. Just don't engage. In a situation where, let's say, okay, somebody else, and inform your household and your family members that they also have this right? Because you don't want somebody else to be going up to the door and answering it, and they don't know, that it's not safe to do so, or that they have the right not to open the door. And then the next thing is, what happens if ICE manages to get in somehow, or just generally if you encounter ICE in public. Now, ICE generally doesn't go around just sweeping randomly and doing enforcement in that way. But just on the off chance that you ever run into an ICE officer in public, your rights are basically the same with any law enforcement who has no particular reason to know who you are or suspect you of anything. You don't have to talk to them. The first thing to say if an officer approaches you is, do I have, can I leave? And if the officer says, yes, you may leave, because they can't detain you unless they have reason to suspect you of a crime. If they say, yes, you can leave, then I'm not going to answer any questions, and I'll walk away. And if they do say that you don't have the right to leave, that they're detaining you, then the other magic words to say at that point are, I'm going to remain silent, I want to speak to an attorney. You don't have to give them your name, you don't have to give them ID, particularly an ID that states your country of origin. If you have a foreign consular ID or a foreign passport, do not give that because that discloses your foreign birth. You don't have to, but you don't have to give an ID. And you don't have to answer any questions. It's the first thing that immigration has to prove when somebody is put into removal proceedings is that this person was born in another country. And so generally, if they don't have documents to prove that, they will use your own admission. And so if you don't admit that, if you don't answer the question of what country you were born in or what immigration status you have, then they will actually not have the evidence they need to meet their burden of proof in immigration court. Just another couple pieces of advice. When somebody is detained by immigration and they're put in removal proceedings, let's say you have a loved one placed in this situation, unless they already had a removal order in the past, they are going to have the right to go before an immigration judge and apply for any immigration benefits they might be eligible for. I won't be able to go through all the immigration benefits, and you definitely need to talk to an attorney about it. But in New York, there's a program called the New York Immigrant Family Unity Project, which is the first in its nation model of assigned counsel, so that if a New Yorker is placed in removal proceedings and they're low income, they can have an attorney provided for them to represent them in immigration court, as long as they don't pay a private attorney before they get assigned that public attorney. So it's very important that people don't go out and pay for somebody to help them apply for bond, because then all of a sudden they're ineligible for a public knife-up attorney. And it's possible, it depends on a lot of factors, but it's possible the person may be able to get out on bond while their case proceeds, and would be able to continue to fight their case while at liberty. It's not the case that somebody gets picked up and then they're on a plane the next day, in most cases, right? Like, people have an opportunity to fight for some type of relief and to go before a judge. And one last point is now is just a risky time to be traveling internationally if you're a non-citizen. So again, if you're a green card holder or someone else who, before you travel internationally, talk to an immigration attorney, see if it's safe to do so. And if you're not documented, there are much fewer sanctuary protections outside of New York City than in New York City. So this is just a bad time to be traveling outside of New York City right now.
Thank you. That was a lot of information, great information. We have one more speaker, and then we are going to turn to Q&A. Before I go to Alina, just out of compassion to our translator, I'm going to ask us to just be silent for 15 seconds so that she can breathe. Is she breathing? Jacinta, you okay?
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to give you 15 seconds. Just breathe. I do this because I sometimes have to translate for the senator, and I know what it's like when he forgets there's someone translating and just going on. So. Okay. So I'm now going to turn to Alina Moquete from Northern Manhattan Coalition for Immigrant Rights. Alina, what are you hearing on the ground from your undocumented clients? What is the prevailing guidance for them at your office?
Well, the last few weeks have been very challenging, to say the least. Everyone is scared, particularly they are afraid of going into their immigration hearing. They are afraid of being detained. And while that is not something that we can say won't happen, what we are trying to do is have everyone be prepared. And what that looks like is creating a plan for your family, especially if you have small children. And we are right now drafting a plan to help our community create or find the tools to come up with the, sorry, I have it right here. So what they would need is a standby guardianship as well as travel permission, just in case they are detained at some point, that they have options for their minor children. We are advising them to find an attorney that can take their case and to distribute their asylum application or important immigration paperwork with different family members so that they have that information available. Also to learn their A number, which might come in handy.
Thank you, thank you. And a lot of our undocumented neighbors, you mentioned, have children. I know that your office, there's different components of a family safety plan, and do allies play a role in developing that family plan?
So right now, what I would say is that what you guys can do, what we can all do, is provide a safe space. If you have childcare available, if you have the ability to take in their families or their children, that'll be a good option.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to take this opportunity to add that your organization, starting in March, will actually start a legal clinic in Senator Jackson's office so that we can continue providing that support. Thank you. And I also heard that you guys are going to take on doing power of attorney to facilitate making these decisions as well.
Yes.
So again, thank you so much for the work that you do. Applause. This question is for everyone, and then we're going to turn to the audience. But before I ask this question for everyone, I just want to express gratitude because I understand that when you're on the front lines helping these populations, these vulnerable populations every day, it's hard for you to take a break of the crisis that we're living in. And so I just want to uplift and just send you really great vibes for self-care because of the care that you provide our communities every day. Thank you. So before we turn to the audience for additional questions, how can New Yorkers at high risk and or allies, and Jessica from the AG's office explained this a little bit, but for everyone else, how can high-risk individuals and allies connect with your organization or stay up to date on the evolving situation?
Right. Thank you. So our office doesn't provide services for individuals so much. And in fact, while we encourage people to stay in touch with us to kind of let us know what's happening on the ground and what you're seeing and what you're hearing, and you know, we have a hotline number, we discourage you from actually giving information about someone who might be undocumented to our office, because that's not something that we're able to do, and that puts that person at risk. But for us, just in terms of the situations as they evolve, we continue to check our website, ag.ny.gov, look at our guidance and our press releases. And we also do some regular calls with various advocacy groups, immigration advocacy groups. We do regular now meetings, virtual meetings with clergy from around the state, all denominations. So we have some regular check-ins so that we can understand what people are seeing and hearing, and so that we can get word out about what's going on. So if you are a member of a church or synagogue or a mosque or any other religious institution, you know, make sure that someone from that institution is in touch with our office so they're on those calls. If you're a member of an organization, advocacy organization, really any social service organization, make sure that there's somebody who's in touch with our office so we can, because we do have ongoing calls so that we can kind of make sure that people understand current status of various laws and lawsuits as they evolve.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else? How does everyone here stay connected with what you're doing, and even how do we support?
I'll just say that for anybody looking for immigration legal advice, I wish I could offer representation to the whole world. We are unfortunately a very small team, and we're specialized in cases that are people who are impacted by contact with the criminal legal system. So if somebody has a criminal case or a criminal record and they want to know how that affects their immigration case, that's certainly a type of case to come to us. But otherwise, for immigration advice, one of the easiest sort of like numbers to remember is just 311, the city services number. You can call through a program called Action NYC. Somebody who calls 311 and asks for immigration advice will be placed with an appointment with a nonprofit in their community to get legal advice and potentially representation. And the state of New York also has a hotline called the Office of New Americans Hotline, which I'll say 2 times, is 1-800-566-7636. So again, that hotline, which is the New York State Office of New Americans Hotline, is 1-800-566-7636, and that is also a way to be connected with Immigration Counsel.
Let me just add that number, we have flyers on the table out there.
And it's up there.
Oh, it's up here, yeah.
Yeah, also.
So it's also out there. You can get an actual copy, and that lists that number of New Americans Hotline, as well as several other numbers that you can call for help or advice.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Okay, I just say quickly, I'm going to scan the QR code and visit the Interfaith Center website, which is interfaithcenter.org. There's an intake form to join the coalition of 90 houses of worship I mentioned earlier. Most of our information is really tailored for houses of worship and community-based organizations who are trying to figure out how they can do this work. But if you do have specific individual needs, we will try to either get you the right resources or get you referred to the folks who can get you the right resources. And I'll just say, in addition to the work I do, ICNY does have a pro bono immigration attorney. So if you're trying to find an attorney to have these sorts of conversations about your house of worship and your space with, reach out to me, which you can find on the Interfaith Center website, or you can find me afterwards, and I can help try and facilitate that connection.
Thank you.
One way to stay in touch with us would be through our website and through our social media. Our doors are now fully open from Monday to Friday.
We work a lot in partnership with other organizations, small businesses, schools, places of worship. Pretty much, if you think organizing trainings, bystander intervention is necessary for you and for the people that are around you to know, will pretty much come to you. One of the reasons that I had stressed earlier about in advocacy, especially participating in local budgeting, local participatory budgeting processes, are because the reason that Medica is doing a lot more work in Washington Heights and Inwood is because that through the CEC's participatory budgeting process, residents actually voted for more safety and self-defense education like the ones that we offer to be implemented here. And so that's why you see me here today. And that's why I'm able to be out here, and we're really trying to connect with other organizations and bring our classes to you all. And we also know that, unfortunately, just not only undocumented community members, but if you are an immigrant, if you are a person of color, for my people of color in the room, if you are visibly someone who identifies as an immigrant, or someone that is likely to get hate crimes, is what I'm trying to say. If that's you, unfortunately, you also are at risk. And we know that hate crimes are on the rise. Violence against immigrants, violence against people of color are on the rise. And so self-defense, bystander intervention, organizing trainings are really crucial right now. And so I think we have emails that we can provide. Senator Jackson's office has been great in giving us our little self-defense kits that we have that has our curriculum, both available, should be in English and Spanish. And then you can always reach out to me personally. You can come talk to me. I'm very friendly.
Thank you, thank you. I just want to add that our office is working with you to set up a self-defense class for the community very soon. We will advise everyone. If you want to know what we're doing, QR codes, Senator Jackson's e-updates, they're great. And also, you talked about hate crimes, and there is an increase of hate crimes with a rise of Islamophobia and also hate against Jewish communities. So it's really important, right, to just have conversations about how we protect each other and defend our communities. So thank you. We're now going to offer the audience an opportunity to ask questions. If you have a question, there's a microphone right in the front. All you have to do is come up and ask. We have about 20 minutes. I just want to honor the space that we're in so that we can wrap up in a timely time. But please come forward.
Hi, wow. I'm Ilana Wallach, and I'm here from Inwood Indivisibles and about 16 other things that I do. Thank you all for speaking. I have two really different questions, so probably different people answer them. One is something that was raised in one of my groups. Somebody said she would be interested in walking or taking children to and from school as an ally. So I'm wondering if maybe one or two of you who do direct assistance can address that, whether that's been being done, and if not, whether you have any thoughts about how that could be initiated. I guess I would add to that childcare in the sense of helping children play outside because their parents might not be comfortable doing that for them. Second question, very briefly. Are you encountering a lot of immigrants who are terrified to give any information to anyone? For example, the AG's office, for example, the organizations that have lawyers, and if so, what should we say? Because they will be talking to us, not to you. So.
Thank you. I can just say that I'm going to reach out to Malika because we have a couple of interns in our office. We're working on a mutual aid, and one of the things that we are looking at is how do we create mutual aid for those that need help getting their children to school, picking up their medication, hospital visits. We've heard of parents who have sick children and are afraid to even take their sick child to the hospital. We heard of that case. And also, we want to study if there's been a decrease in individuals who go to the food pantries. For example, for Washington Collegiate Church, we have the Ford fridge, and there's always long lines. And there is a general concern that that line may diminish because we have undocumented individuals who feel especially vulnerable standing out there. And so I know that You said your organization does mutual aid, and we definitely want to connect with you to see what that looks like. But if you want to expand.
You want to adjust your mic.
Adjust my mic. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it is very difficult, especially when working with minors, because there's just so much to consider. There's so much sensitivity that needs to be taken into consideration, right? So I think my point, going back, and again, it feels very simple, but it's so crucial to trust and knowing your people. I think creating, I think the organizations that we work with, and they're amazing. They do a lot of great work, but just mobilizing and working with small groups of people that are trust individuals to each other, and that, that there's lasting power, right? That even speaking to your point about people feeling afraid to talk to organizations like us, especially when you have a big logo and everything, and it can get scary. So really organizing around the people that you know, speaking to them about, and starting there, not trying to reach out to people that maybe you don't have so much trust built up with. Starting small and expanding that network is going to be really helpful, I think, for you in thinking about childcare, kind of supporting that. And then I want to speak to a point about the food pantries. I know something that we do. We also run a community fridge, a halal community fridge in our area in Astoria. But also during Ramadan, something that we do is food distributions, like grocery distributions, for example. So community members will kind of buy groceries, and they'll actually go to their neighbors' houses, or once again, it's a trust thing. So it's people that they know, or people that are kind of around them, that have their trust, and then kind of maybe circumventing the lines and the public scenery.
Right. So, for example, a parents' association, because it's already built in trust and they work together. A tenants association, because you know your neighbors and it's already built in. So starting structures that have already developed that trust and kind of build up from there.
Exactly, and even I don't think it has to be even branded or known as an association. If you have a group message or a small community forum with the people on your floor, even that's somewhere to start. And even so, as that kind of group gains more trust and reliability, you can think about expanding to everyone that needs help, but really starting small.
Hello, thank you for all this great information. My name is Danette Lipton. I'm also with Inwood Indivisible and Bend the Arc Jewish Action Riverdale. I wanted to ask about the distribution of Know Your Rights cards. If I were to carry Know Your Rights cards in my wallet, and how would I know when or to whom I should give a card? I don't want to profile. I don't want to create fear. And I want to help people. So what to do?
So I have some, by the way, that we here today. These are actually just Spanish-English ones. I realized after ordering these that I need English ones. The red cards are on one side. It says in the given language, and this one in Spanish, some of the basic things I said about Know Your Rights, right? And it's meant to be sort of, for example, kept on you or kept near the door to your house, so that if there's somebody banging on the door, you have this reminder of your rights right there. And the other side, in English, it says it's basically an invocation of your right to silence and your other rights to either hand to an officer if you encounter an officer in public, or to slide under the door if you're at home, and it basically just invokes your rights. And so if you're handing them, I would recommend just sort of making these available to people. You can print them out on your own they're distributed by the ILRC on their webpage. You can just print them out your own, or you can make an order if you use a lot of them. They have a printer, a union printer that prints them out. So ILRC red cards, I would suggest making them available, and letting people know where they are, and then they can pick them up.
So you shouldn't walk around and give them to people who you think might need them. You shouldn't do that.
No, I would recommend just making them available, and you can let people know where they are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Jackson and your staff, thank you for having this. To all of the panelists, surely believe. We can clap for that because we need the right information. So much information out here, and if we don't get the right information, then we won't get the help that we need. I guess I have a two-part question. Reverend Jeffrey Crenshaw, lived Washington Heights all my life. As a faith leader, does ICE have the ability to arrest you if, let's say, you're delaying? Let's say if they come in and you know one of your members or parishioners is undocumented and you kind of move them to the side, do they have that right to arrest you? And even if you're not a faith leader, how much intervening can you do? Do they have the power to arrest you? And then my second question, as far as the ID, and you said that we don't have to tell them who we are. Can they ask us for our ID? And along with that, if they detain you, if you don't answer any questions, if they're detaining you, do they have the right to search you? Because, we instruct our people, our young folk, everybody, make sure you're walking with some form of ID. So how does that work?
So these are great questions. So there is a law called the Federal Harboring Statute that makes it a federal crime to quote-unquote harbor somebody from ICE. And so this is usually used in situations where somebody is helping somebody fraudulently get fraudulent papers, or is sort of like smuggling people within the United States. It hasn't generally been used against people who are just associating with or giving legal advice or information to people who are undocumented, and it really would run against. There's a sort of a blurry line where the First Amendment would cut that off, right? Where this law ends and where the First Amendment begins. So it's hard to give sort of like a definitive answer, but if you're just giving people legal information or information about their rights, that is 100% protected by legal activity. If you're helping somebody get connection with legal representation, that's 100% First Amendment protected activity. However, I would say don't lie about like the presence of a person. Just be silent, right? You don't have to answer a question about the presence of a person, but don't lie, because that can cause other problems. And it's always dangerous to physically obstruct any type of federal, law enforcement officer. So I would also recommend against physical obstruction. And then as to the other question, so as far as searches and seizures, law enforcement is able to do a pat down if they suspect that a person may have weapons on them, but it's only for the purpose of finding weapons. That's stop and frisk, and it's enforced in very problematic ways. There's been a lot of litigation around that in New York City. But they're not generally supposed to just be able to search you and your belongings for ID or for documentation. And so I've mentioned a couple magic words to invoke generally in these situations, like, am I free to leave? I'm going to remain silent. I want to speak to an attorney. Another set of magic words to invoke your legal rights is, I do not consent to a search. And if they are, going through anything, your bag, your car, I do not consent to a search. It's important to state that clearly. If they've decided that they have a reasonable suspicion to arrest somebody for a crime or because they think they're undocumented, then again, they don't have the right to search somebody without consent, other than the pat down. And the person still does not have to give ID. It's very important that the person doesn't answer questions about their, in particular about their country of origin or their immigration status. And the person has to do what they feel is most safe in that circumstance, because law enforcement, it's very scary. Law enforcement can escalate things, and so people have to do what they feel safe in the moment. But if at all possible, you want to keep to your rights and not answer questions.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ken Gibson. I live in the neighborhood. I've met you, sir, a couple times. Always a pleasure to be in your presence. Thank you for doing this, and thank all of you. So I just thought I'd share a little experience with you I had Saturday. I speak on an immigrant-owned radio station. We broadcast live from the Bronx. And so I was, thinking about this whole issue, and I thought, I went through the historical record and found there had been an amnesty that was effective, that nobody can complain about. It was actually bipartisan, which is kind of rare, especially these days. But the point is the amnesty was effective, and so I was kind of rambling on about this amnesty that I was trying to put up on the web, but I'm not very technically savvy, so I just kind of had it somewhere. And while I was speaking with Miguel Hernandez, he's the host, I'm the co-host of the show, the owner of the station, Raul Alcantara, who's an immigrant, burst in from the other room, bumped our fists, grabbed all my information, grabbed the mic, and just started pushing this whole issue, not surprisingly, and asking me more questions, and I was kind of, I wasn't able to really go that far with this, because just today I had a tech person make a QR code for the amnesty petition that he somehow put on my Google Mail, which I didn't even know exists, so I gave him some password from 5 years ago, and he did it. So there is an amnesty petition on the web, and all I know is that if those of you who have better cell phones than I do, I still have a flip phone, you can do the QR code and go right to the amnesty petition and sign it. So you'll see what's up there, so I won't take any more time boring you with that. But let me say this, Mr. Jackson, can you and I connect? I'd like to invite you, first of all, on the show. It's Saturday nights, but you can just call in. You don't have to come all the way to the Bronx. You can call in if you don't speak in Spanish. Oh, the show is in Spanish, by the way. We speak in Spanish, but we translate for those who don't. So call in and let's have some discussion with Raul Alcantara and all the other staff at Radio Sabor, and we can get this out there to everyone. So thank you very much. I'm just going to hang about in the back when you leave or something. Just do a QR code and this will be working. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, it's all right. I should know if I should wait. Yeah, that's fine.
I'm going to invoke translator privilege, who has something really important to share.
Hello, everyone. I want to share that there's a website called immigrationlawhelp.org. It provides assistance for people of low income, low resources, and has a sliding scale. So they go in and you actually put in your zip code, and it provides attorneys in that area that are providing these services. And it goes from anything from family-based petitions to asylum from TPS. And again, it's immigrationlawhelp.org. You put your zip code in. So it goes for everyone. You put your zip code in and immediately provides you a list of attorneys working in your area that provide services that you seek. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Nicole. I'm a student journalist at Columbia University. There's just been some differing things that I've heard, so I just wanted to check. For ICE raids, some people have said that there's been a lot more ICE raids. Sorry, I'm just leaning down. There's a lot more ICE raids, but that maybe they're just more visible. And so I was wondering if you guys could speak on that, if there's just, if the ICE raids are more visible to create more fear, or if they actually are up in numbers significantly from, the last administration, the last time Trump was in, that sort of thing. And kind of a two-part question. How is that fear affecting the people that you guys work with? And how do we inform people of the things that you guys just said today? Make sure they're informed without overwhelming them with so much fear that they're scared to go outside or scared to live their lives. Sorry, it was kind of a double question.
I can touch on the first one. I don't know if somebody has going for the second one, but so it is a little bit hard to say if enforcement actions by ICE have really increased so far. The sort of like networks to gather information about what, like where people report where ICE is, it's a little bit haphazard right now, and it's decentralized. Like there's different things being reported in different places, and we're trying to gather information from a lot of places. Personally, I haven't seen a significant increase from previous administrations. But we know that their strategy is shock and awe, so certainly they did some high-profile arrest actions in Chicago and in New York. There was a set of raids at residences in the Bronx where this new Secretary of Homeland Security came on along as a sort of photo op. But the number, I haven't seen the number increase yet. they don't have the ability to sort of on a sustained basis just keep doing raids like this, which is why during the last Trump administration, they would do sort of like an occasional action where they would like do a bunch of raids coordinated at once in target cities. Usually they want to target, for punitive reasons, sanctuary cities like New York. But it's not something they're able to keep up on a sustained basis. And like I've said, fewer than 1% of people per year generally who are undocumented are deported from the US, right? Of course, the Trump administration is going to try to beat those records, right? And they're trying a number of different ways to try to deputize different like law enforcement. For example, ICE has a component called Homeland Security Investigations, which investigates, like human trafficking and drug trafficking and things like that. And they've been told to stop all of those investigations and send all their agents to just deport people. And so, and there's talk about, like National Guard from red states being activated or certain military to be activated. And some of that had already happened during prior administrations, including the Biden administration. But certainly we're going to see them try to deputize as many people as possible to increase the number of deportations.
Thank you so much for that. And yeah, if anyone can speak on how do we inform people without overwhelming with fear?
Yeah, I think to the second part of your question, certainly what I'm seeing, and I would be hard pressed to hear from anyone else, that fear is way up. And I think, and we've hit on this on a couple of questions, the best way to combat fear is trust. And the unfortunate thing, and the fortunate thing, to be honest about trust, is it takes a lot of time to develop. And so we should look to and support organizations that have been doing this work and have already built trusted relationships, to support them monetarily with donations, to support, that should be a great place to put volunteer efforts. And going back even to like the red cards, those are the sorts of places that we need to be sure have and are distributing trusted and invaluable resources.
I just want to add one thing, especially from like a community organizing perspective. I think focusing on solutions rather than the fact that maybe posting, ICE was spotted here, and that's first of all not even maybe verified fully, focusing on solutions. And then also speaking to a point that, yeah, our communities, undocumented communities, immigrant communities have been facing this reality for a long time. And so raising awareness within allied communities, within communities who are not facing this as their everyday reality is really, really important. And so thinking about how do we reach our undocumented community members is important if you are adjacent to that or you have connections there. But if you're a community member that doesn't necessarily, making sure that your community is aware of the history and the reality and the fact that this has been a reality for a lot of folks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Because we are at the 8 o'clock mark, I just want to make sure that Carolina is the last person to ask questions. Yeah. Okay. ¿Quiere que te traduzca?
Buenas noches. Gracias a ustedes por estar aquí, pero mi mayor gracia primero se la doy a Dios y después a nuestro querido senador Robert Jackson, a su equipo, a Johanna, porque yo estoy sintiendo que se está preparando para un gobierno dictador o de terror. Entonces, con todas las informaciones que el señor senador está llevando a la comunidad, es maravilloso porque así se aplaca un poco el miedo y la inquietud que tiene la gente. Pero mi preocupación mayor son los niños, de los padres que deportan y que lo cogen de sorpresa. Y ellos, ¿cómo van a dejar a sus hijos aquí? Y si lo dejan, ¿qué garantía se cree que se puede buscar para esos niños que se quedan sin sus padres?
So to translate, before anything else, I give thanks to God for having this panel and being here. I also give thanks to, we're in church, you can. I say we're in church because, I work for the government, I'm gonna have separation, but not today. Also give thanks and give gratitude to Senator Robert Jackson for hosting this event and being able to disseminate this information. Ms. Carmen Rojas feels very strongly that it is through these kinds of events and distributing this kind of information that we can address the fear that is felt so deeply in our communities. But her greatest concern is the children. Right now, there are situations and there's a big fear that there are going to be children that are going to be left without their parents because their parents are deported. And then, so what is the plan? Like, how do you provide, how do you prepare, how do you protect these children that are at risk of being left behind?
So one thing that that people can do, and there's a number of emergency preparedness resources out there, such as on the Immigrant Defense Project website, the Immigrant Defense Project Emergency Preparedness. So one thing that people can do to prepare for the event of ICE is to sign some documentation that designates a certain person of their choice to have parental rights over their child in the case that they are arrested by ICE. And to have somebody who can be sort of like on alert that if anything happens, to be, that they can call this person and say, can you come take my children, take care of my children, and to ensure that the children don't end up in foster care or things like that. That's my recommendation.
I just want to add, I think for everyone here and who's wanting to be helpful, I feel like there's a lot of organizations and websites and phone numbers. I would say just check out a few of them, familiarize yourself with them, so that you understand some of the information that's out there. You might not want to hand someone a sheet that has 12 different things on it, but if you've sort of explored a little bit, if you've gone on a website and you see that it has good information, it's a known organization, it's listed, and you feel comfortable, then there's a place that you can refer people, or there's information that you can get. So I would just encourage people here who want to be helpful to really check out some of these websites and be familiar with them.
Gracias.
Thank you.
¿Le vas a traducir lo que respondieron?
Ella
Should I wait?
el equipo
Oh,
para
yes, yes.
traducción.
Okay,
Sí.
I have a question, and with Joanna's permission, also would like to make a short announcement about Inwood Indivisible's Immigration Justice Committee.
Get a little closer to the mic.
Because I've got a mask. Okay, I'll move away from Nick and I'll take my mask off.
I'm not scared of you.
So the question first. We've been trying, I work with Inwood Indivisible and been the Arch-Jewish Action. You've been hearing Inwood Indivisible a lot tonight because we're very active in this issue. We have an active Immigration Justice Committee, and we've started doing work with Brennan to try to distribute some packets to places of worship. If you don't have one of these packets yet and you represent a place of worship, please see me before you leave. But we are also trying to start now doing more work, moving into businesses and places of employment to try to distribute the proper information and to use the red cards properly, because we've been seeing them posted on the wall. People don't know that the purpose of them is to hand them over. So we're trying to get ourselves trained, and we're going through training. But another thing we want to start doing more of is legislative work. And the senator mentioned some legislation that he's working on. But it's very hard to decide because there's local legislation and the city council is considering. Then there's New York for All. Then there's a packet that's this thick from Make the Road. So if you were to advise a small but growing group of allies as to where they should direct their efforts in the legislative field, lobbying, postcards, phone calls, petitions, texting, et cetera, where would you focus that effort? On New York for All, on the city council legislation? What would be your advice?
I think you're actually exhibiting one piece of advice I would have, which is I would, especially for a group that's so rooted in your community, I would attend and get to know the representatives in your community so that across the slew of legislative options that you described, you can properly point them to the relationships that you have. And from there, I think it's it's important to think, where can you change hearts and minds? If you feel like you can move your senator, I don't know, it's the senator signed on to New York for all.
I think he's a sponsor.
Oh, perfect. Or a state assembly member, then you should try to move that heart and that mind. If not, how can you look towards your community, whether it's at the city council level, at a different level, or just how can you look towards your community? How can you start changing and shaping the narrative within your community around immigration?
But any particular legislative packet that you would say direct us towards as having a greater impact or more likelihood of passing, or does it matter that it may not pass? Should we just go for it anyway?
Can I answer that as a government representative? So we have NYIC, which is a big, huge lobbying immigration group. And they usually on their website have the legislative packets, priorities that they have. That's one thing. The other thing is that because so many policymakers are just really surprised at the audacity of the federal action, that there's new legislation being churned out every day. Everyone's kind of brainstorming like, whoa, this is a different angle, what do we do here? So you are going to see emergent legislation that may not have made it on some of these immigrant advocacy and think tanks. So I think like asking these questions and what you're doing right now to stay tuned to what's happening, it's a good idea. I think another thing that many advocates may not remember or be cognizant is the legislative calendar, which may help you kind of time your energy, because one thing about advocacy is that it's tiring, it's exhausting, so you want to really prioritize where you put your energy and your time. So with the state legislature, legislation happens between January and June. And if it doesn't have a cost factor, like no fiscal impact, it's likely going to get passed between March and June, just so that like if you're like timing where you push and when. And then in the city council level, legislation happens all year round, but it usually takes a break in the summer. And so just so you know, like when you're kind of amped the ante. So let's say you have really good state legislation that you want to get passed this year, you have until June to push it, or you're gonna have to wait until next year, January. And then if there's like city council legislation, you still like don't put your foot off the pedal, but know that you'll still have an opportunity to pass that legislation or to push for its passage in the fall and late winter. You're welcome. Call me anytime. You have my cell phone.
And I just wanted to repeat, if you're from a place of worship and you haven't received signage that will help you keep your congregants safe, I'm here. Alana, you have some packets, and some other people have packets. Please see one of the Inwood Indivisible members so that we can hook you up.
Thank you.
That should be used to this by now. Wait, here we go. All right. Hello, good evening. And Senator Jackson, Joanna, and the Jackson team, thank you so much for doing this during midwinter recess, because a parent is free for a minute. It's all good. Thank you guys for collaborating and agreeing to do this, because sometimes you don't know what the answer is, especially if you're a regular, everyday person who is just trying to figure out what to do next. My name is Caroline Jose. I represent the District 6 parent leadership community of CEC and PTAs all around, and inclusive of just being a good old mom, trying. I come to you with two questions. In the space of our older students, so to speak, teenagers, as they travel back and forth on the subways, I can't help but notice many police officers, even more than before. And in the last few weeks, we've had our huge presence between the 168th Street Station and 157th Street Station. They're coming in groups of 7, at max is what I've seen. I'm always fearful that they're questioning students along the ride because they can't get off. What is it that we can do as parents to supply our students outside of the card conversations that will be helpful for them to remember easily? That is one of my hugest concerns. And the second question for you guys is how can parent leaders effectively advocate for pro-immigrant policies at the local and state level? Thank you.
I'm telling you, moms have the best questions.
I mean, I think, probably the other answer is better, but I mean, a young person under the age of 18 should never speak to, give information without their parent present, parent guardian present. And so everyone should let their kids know that. They should never do that.
I'll try. I mean, that was a really deep question. And I think something that I can offer is just making sure that the students or the children know that they have an organized group to support them. So sometimes they might feel like, well, maybe my parent is undocumented, or maybe my parent is at risk, or there's just like a barrier for them to maybe bring the fact that they were questioned or that they're fearful of this to their own parent because they see them as being maybe vulnerable or even more vulnerable than themselves. So as like an alliance or as a group, making sure that you all are organized and also making sure that you're doing more outreach to other parents to actually like show up for parents when, even in not this specific case, but in other cases as well, when they need support at the maybe administrative level, right? If something happens to a student, like actually investigating that a little bit as parents and then bringing it to administration as an organized group and being able to maybe fight that, right? So in one area, my advice in one area is also in every area. So I think, being organized as an alliance and doing more outreach to other parents and making sure that you all are actually active and present, and goes back to the trust.
Thank you so much for the really incredible questions. I'll be honest, I'm particularly intimidated by question 2 because I see Naveed Hassan is in the room, who is the Government Affairs Committee Chair of PEP, which
The Panel for Education Policy.
Yeah, and I think I would encourage you to have a conversation with him afterwards for the sorts of things that different specific school districts have, community districts have done around this, because there is such a crucial need that our schools have the right infrastructure and policies and trainings in place. And there is clear ways, but I'm just not going to articulate it in the same way.
That's all right. He comes to our meetings all the time, so I'm sure I'll see you.
And Caroline, I want to add that just speaking as a former parent organizer, and my colleagues may kill me afterwards, sorry, in advance, but let's have a side conversation about how Team Jackson can actually facilitate workshops for your parent community as to what conversations do parents need to have at home with their children. Because I remember particularly as a mom, right after the George Floyd incident, I had to have a difficult conversation with my children, particularly my son. And so I think we're at that point right now with our children, unfortunately, and it's the same generation of children again, of what to do, what are your rights, and parents need to know how do you have these sensitive conversations, and that's going to take a sensitive conversation and key stakeholders. So Team Jackson will pull together that information and those key stakeholders to provide that information.
We are profoundly grateful. Thank you so much for that, and thank you guys very, very much for your time. Really, really appreciate it on this snowy Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you guys for staying 15 minutes extra and for this incredible, incredible panel. Thank you. There were a lot of thank yous to State Senator Robert Jackson and to Team Jackson, but I want to emphasize that this event was only made possible through the partnership of not only the panelists, but really because we are in partnership with Fort Washington Collegiate Church, which continues to stand as a community church open for all. So thank you to Pastor David. Thank you to Minister Deneen Davis. Thank you for Chair Lisa. Thank you for Board Member Melissa. Thank you for Board Member Gwen. Thank you, because it is going to take our faith leaders, our elected members, our community-based organization leaders, our residents, New Yorkers, to really keep us safe. And so every single one of you, you just in this house of worship have really amplified what it means to have faith in this challenging time. Thank you and have a great evening.